Hi, Jake. How you doing? And
Hi,
welcome.
I'm
Um,
great.
yeah, nice to see you again, even though it's, quite a distance this time. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
so I hear you have a show coming up. Where's your show?
So I have a show that's opening on October 6th, and it's at a place called Elixir in Nevada City in California. Really cool, kind of like a bar, but it's all like herbal elixirs and tonics and things from all over the world. It's a really cool place. So if you're in California and you want to come check it out, it'll be up for the whole of October, but the opening reception's on the 6th.
Oh, that's amazing. Is it a solo show, Jake?
Yes, this is actually my first solo show that I've had in the United States, and my second solo show that I've had in general. The first one was when I was in Bali last year at a place called Michi Gallery, and it will have 15 works, some of which are a bit older, and other ones which are newer, a few that I've never shown online before, even. So I'm really excited about it.
That's amazing. And so you're also just your show in Bali. Did you carry all the artworks over there, or did you have them printed in Bali?
Um, Actually, like many of the pieces that I showed in that show I created while I was living in Bali, and then other pieces were reproductions. And one of them was a piece that I had been working on in other countries, but I was traveling with at the time and I had finished while I was there. So that show, I think, had something like maybe like 10 pieces, and five of them were reproductions, and the rest of them were originals. And all of the original work that I showed in that show I had created while I was living in Bali.
How long were you living there for, Jake? In Bali?
I lived in Bali for, I was in Bali for 5 months.
Wow,
I
that's
lived in
quite a long
Ubud while I
time.
was there. And that was, yeah, it was amazing. Well, I actually had a flight to go back to the United States. I had planned to only be in Bali for 6 weeks, but I just fell in love with it and I just wanted to stay. And yeah, it was hard to leave, and I miss it quite a lot.
So you renewed your visa, and that was all right.
Yeah, there's some loopholes. Like if you leave the country, you're allowed to re-enter. So I left the country twice while I was there.
Um, okay, Jake. So can you tell us a bit more about your upcoming show?
Yeah, sure. So the show is titled Psychic Crystallizations, and I'm demonstrating work that I've created over the past 4 years or so. And the title refers to the fact that each work of art is, in essence, a crystallization, a concretization of my psychic, emotional, and mental states as I'm creating them. So each piece is kind of, in essence, like a time capsule to that moment in my life when I was creating them. Um, and it's like freezing all of those feelings and experiences that I'm having in those moments into a physical artifact. So that is why I titled the show Psychic Crystallizations. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to showing these pieces kind of as like a series, even though they've been created over an extended period of time. And I also am presenting writing to accompany most of the work to give the viewer a deeper understanding of the pieces and what they represent.
That is amazing. And so these are mostly, or are they digital, or are they paint on canvas, or what medium are they?
Um, There's several different mediums in the show. There are oil paintings, there are acrylic paintings, there are some reproductions of digital work. There are several drawings that are either pencil or pen, and There are one or two that are kind of mixed, like they were created digitally and then elaborated upon with paint. So over the past about year or two, I haven't really been as involved in the creation of digital art, and I've been primarily focused on painting. So it's kind of interesting to see the different works and the different mediums over different periods of time. This show is almost like a retrospective in a way, because the work that's being displayed is work that spans pretty much the total breadth of my career as an artist so far.
And your painting, your acrylic painting called Suno, of the lady with the fire,
Swain,
Sueno. Um,
Sueño. It means dream. And
when did you do that?
so that piece I started in 2015 when I was in Canada. I started it live at a festival called Shambhala, which is a really big festival. It's kind of like the Burning Man of Canada. At least that's what some people call it. And I worked on it when I was then studying in Florence, Italy, and I worked on it a bit there. And then I worked on it throughout the tour when I was in Australia. And ultimately, I finished it when I was in Bali in the beginning of 2016. So I worked on that piece on and off for about a year in several places. And something that's kind of interesting is that I think that there's influences, visual influences in the aesthetic of the piece that kind of come about from those different places specifically. So the ornament that's on it is really closely related to the architecture that you see all over Florence, for example.
That's
It's
phenomenal.
acrylic.
Okay, so that's two, is it like two beings connecting with each other, creating one being? That's what I get out of it.
Sort of. Yeah, it's like there's many ways of looking at it. Like there's the central figure that's meditating in the lotus flower, and then there's also this large face, which is kind of like over its torso. And there's like a second face that's on the torso. And then there's the other like faces that are off towards the sides. So it's not really like specifically like a it wasn't specifically conceived to represent like two beings merging together. It kind of is more of this entity that kind of emerged through the process of creating it. And the entity that it kind of most strongly most closely resembles is Baphomet, which is actually kind of it's often seen as a more evil or dark kind of uh, figure in symbol. It's used often within the Satanic Church, for example, and it has a lot of ties to kind of like a Christian conception of the devil. But there's actually the symbol of Baphomet is also one which is very ancient and has a lot of ties to occultism. So occultists in the 19th century were interested in using the Baphomet symbol to represent the union of polarities and the union of light and dark, man and nature, um, as above, so below. These different forces which are typically opposed being united. And I think that the reason why it's kind of been vilified and looked upon as an evil symbol is because these occultists that were practicing kind of Gnostic ideas were in opposition to the church. So the church kind of just pointed their finger and said, well, that's like devil worship. But it was in actuality just a misunderstanding.
Wow. So you also said you studied in Italy for a while. Was that with Amanda Sage and Daniel Moranti?
Oh, no, no, no. I studied at a classical art atelier in Florence, Italy, called the Angel Academy of Art, which is a very old school, and they teach a very specific, um, regimented style of art instruction that's geared towards classical realist drawing and painting. And yeah, it's like it's kind of, it has its roots in this artist named Pietro Annigoni, who was like a master classical realist painter in the 1950s, and then he had an apprentice, Michael John Angel, who then started the school. And the Angel Academy is certainly one of the oldest classical art schools in the world, and like kind of one of the most highly revered. But people have taken the Atelier model, which is based off of 19th century French academic painting, and they've created schools all over the world. There's schools in Australia and in the United States, and yeah, all over the place.
That's amazing. Um, okay, and also this self-portrait you did with oil and tempera called Embers. Is that a
Yeah,
new piece?
no, I painted this piece in 2015. I painted it. I started this actually like with Amanda Sage at the Torrey Superiore workshop, which was the Visionary Art Academy's kind of summer program. And then I spent a term at the Academy of Visionary Art in Vienna and continued to work on it and finished it there. So yeah, I guess I worked on it for a period of between like 4 and 6 months over that time.
Yeah, because that is sometimes one of the first questions people tend to ask is how long did that painting take, which is almost an impossible thing to answer. And then just having a look at some of your digital art, like this painting, An Ode to the Great Grandmother. Actually, that's from
Mhm.
2013. That is
Yeah,
unreal. Is that mainly Photoshop or which program do you use for that?
I use a program. Yeah, primarily I use a program called Painter, which is it's different in many ways to Photoshop, but also similar. It's I guess you could say that Photoshop was primarily created as like a photo editing and manipulation tool, whereas Painter as a software is really specifically for drawing and painting. So they have tools in Pro Painter that are they mimic traditional mediums. Like there's watercolor brushes that you can use that actually like disperse, just like when you put watercolor on paper. And there's a lot of other tools with it. It's a really complicated program, not complicated to use, but just like complex in its ability to be manipulated and to be, to build your own tools in it and things like that. So I kind of gravitate towards it because it's a little more organic. It's a bit more like just drawing or painting with a paintbrush.
Just talking about Eros, so acrylic on canvas.
Mm.
Um, that is how large is that painting? Um, Beautiful. And where did you paint that?
So that piece I made when I was in Vienna and I was studying at the Academy of Visionary Art. And that was kind of like my first painting, or one of my first paintings using acrylic. So really learning that medium from Autumn Sky Morrison. And yeah, it was a portrait of me and my now ex-girlfriend Magdalena, who I was still with at the time that I painted it. Yeah, and it's about I think 20 by 40 inches.
Now, was this
And I
painting?
learned, that was a really fun piece. Oh, I
Um,
was saying that was a really fun piece. I really learned a lot about how to use color and explored a lot of new styles, I think, in that piece.
okay, so this self-portrait looks very mysterious and very uh, almost dark, um, and
Yeah.
also a bit etheric. So were you trying to portray like a side of yourself, or were you just playing with technique?
Yeah, I think that when I start a painting, it just goes in a certain direction and I follow that and it kind of just comes out. And like and I think it usually reflects whatever my state of mind is at the time. So I've created a self-portrait every year on November 1st for the last like 7 or 8 years as a as a part of this kind of global art school kind of thing that's called International Self-Portrait Day. So I made that piece when I was in Florence, Italy on November 1st, and then worked on it for a little while after, and just at the time I was like really depressed, and it was kind of a bit of like a darker time for me. And I guess there's a lot of that kind of emotion and the sort of yeah, there's like a bit of the more like kind of like ghoulish aspects of my personality, I suppose, that kind of like came through that particular piece as a reflection of the sort of like state that I was in the time that I created it. And I was really trying to express that. I think it's like, you know, a self-portrait is something really vulnerable in its own way, and like a lot of artists kind of have a lot of fear around it, and they don't like to do that because it's like really putting yourself out there. So with that piece, it was like I really wanted to like show people, and like because I connect with people in that way, to kind of like show the sort of state of mind that I was in at that time. You know, I don't know, to try to like to try to reach out and connect with people or something like that.
How did you find the art in Bali? I know there's a lot of art in Ubud, and how did this influence this specific drawing?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of amazing art in Bali. Like everywhere you go, actually, is covered in just these like elaborately detailed, meticulously crafted carvings. So there's, you know, temples in almost every person's home in Bali, and they're all elaborately carved. As far as I'm concerned, I think the Balinese artists are some of the greatest craftspeople in the world, and they have a really rich developed vocabulary of symbolism also within their culture. So that piece is specifically influenced by the deity Barong, which is on top of all their temples. And Barong is like the king of the spirits, they call him, and he's kind of like this spiritual entity that like fights in the force of good. So he looks really like demonic, but actually he's like a protector. So they put this scary face over all their temples, which is like a lion, to kind of try to scare away evil forces that might come to the temples and things like that.
Wow. And also just having a look at your subtle realm mandala. That is incredible and incredibly detailed as well. Um, so again, where were you when you created that piece?
That piece I made before I left to travel, or when I was in a period of not traveling, and I was living in California at the time that I made that. But it was really influenced by some traveling that I did before. Like that piece is sort of based off of this ceiling that was in this place called Montserrat, which is a palace that's in Portugal, in this amazing little town called Sintra. So I had traveled there over the summer, the year before I had made that piece, and I had taken a bunch of photographs. And it was just like, I remember laying down on my back and staring up at the ceiling and just being so awestruck by it. And this really elaborate geometric design. So I kind of took that design and made my own interpretation of it, which is what created that piece.
Also, just your piece transmission. That's incredibly striking. Is that gold leaf that you've used there, or is that just a yellow that you've you know, a yellow that made it look like gold?
No, there's no gold leaf. It's all just oil, just standard oil paint.
That's incredible.
That piece I was also living in California at the time that I did it in the United States.
just tell us where people can see more of your work, like online.
Yeah, sure. So I have a website which can be reached at www.cobrinart.com. I update my Instagram regularly, and that is jcobrinart. And I have a Facebook page, which is you can look up Jake Kobrin Art and Design on Facebook. So those are the three places I would recommend looking at my work. Probably my Instagram is the place that's most thoroughly updated. Yeah, so in addition to my painting, I also have a jewelry and fashion design line called Medicine Dragon Designs, and the online store for that is still in the works. But for now, if you search Medicine Dragon Designs, you can find that on Facebook, and you can see my jewelry, some of which I'm wearing, like this necklace, for example. Also, soon I'm endeavoring to learn tattooing. So in the near future, tattoo art could be I could be available for tattoos and things like that. If anyone ever has any desire to collaborate on projects, I've done a lot of album covers and various commission works, and I'm really happy to help bring people's visions into reality. So feel free to contact me. I'm always open to new ideas.
Uh, so Jake, just want to say thank you so much for sharing your work with us. It's been amazing, um, and inspiring. So yeah, hopefully we'll see you again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure.